Good evening, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today. Really, really excited to have a very special guest here with us. I'm Barn Schreier. I'm with Generation UCAN, and we've got Tina Muir. Tina, how you doing today?
I'm doing well. How about you?
Pretty good. And I have to laugh because we just talked about how to say your last name, and I totally got nervous by the bright lights and
I
butchered
don't.
that. So,
Great.
my
You got to be thankful I didn't give you my husband's name because his name is Pacucci, and you can't even imagine how people hack that. So yeah, you're lucky you got the other one, but no, I'm used to it by now.
and I'm Sriram, so I take it as a badge of
Yeah.
honor of not being able to butcher other people's names. But hey, what can you do? But Tina, really, really excited to have you on here with us. I know it's been a whirlwind for you the last couple of weeks, and
Yeah.
we want to get into your story and your experience and your journey as a professional runner. But
hmm
before we really dive into all that, maybe start us off by giving folks a little bit of your background in the sport of running and kind of how you came to this big decision that you arrived at.
You want me to go way back to the
Yeah,
to the very
yeah.
beginning?
Let's go way back. Let's let the audience get to know you a little bit.
Well, on the 6th of August, 1988, a little person came. No, um, I've just shared my birthday live on air. That's not very good. But yeah, so around 14, I started running. I didn't like it at the beginning. In fact, I hated it. But as with most things, once you start getting somewhat good at them, you kind of say, hey, actually, this is kind of fun. So I started doing them more and more of it and joined a local running club. I had a great coach there. He was great not to push me too hard, which I'm so thankful for now as a teenager. But I worked my way up, ended up finishing 16th in England at a championship, and then I started getting scholarship offers to go to the US, and I'd always loved America. I'd loved the kind of the cheesy, like, yay, land of opportunity kind of things. So it just seemed like a great place for me to go to kind of see what I could do with my running. And at that point, I was really struggling with my running. I don't know. I mean, I wasn't giving it as much attention as I should have been, but I knew that, but I couldn't get myself out of the kind of funk of it. So I knew that was a good opportunity. So I did. I went to Ferris State University in Michigan, which is a small D2. I had a great career there. Really enjoyed being there. Ended up as an 11-time All-American, which I was quite proud of. And then went on to kind of run professionally for a few years. Well, up to now, I guess, and was thankful to be kind of picked up by Saucony, to be one of the Saucony Hurricanes, and I've been running for them since. And then, yes, 6 weeks ago, I kind of reached a point where I had kind of accomplished my #1 goal, which was to represent Great Britain. And almost to the day, a year later, I kind of came to the conclusion that it was time for me to focus on something else. I had always thought about starting a family, and I hadn't. The big reveal, I guess, was that I hadn't had a period in 9 years, and we had exhausted every option. I mean, I'd seen every specialist under the sun. In fact, today I went to a liver specialist because we booked that way in January, and we'd exhausted everything. But everyone came to the same conclusion. Like, I'm sorry, it's just the running. You've kind of scared it away so much. So yeah, I stopped running 6 weeks ago. I haven't run since. I hope to get back into it someday, but for now, I'm kind of taking a new channel and seeing where this kind of goes and helping other people with their running. So.
You've talked a lot in recent weeks about falling out of love with the sport of running, at least temporarily. But let's go back a little bit. How did you fall in love with running? What was it that drew you into the sport and made it such a big part of your life for how long it was, and it still is, I should say. I should
Yeah,
speak
and
in past
it
tense.
definitely still is. That's like something I've been trying to like get across lately, is that like I'm not saying I hate it, and I think that's why part of the reason why I did step away when I did, because I could tell that if I kept kind of banging my head against the wall, I was eventually going to reach the point where I was like, I want nothing to do with this entire world. Like, don't even mention the word running to me. And I didn't want to get to that point. So I want to keep being in the world. But yeah, so I guess, I don't know when it was that I specifically was like, I love running, but I think the competitiveness in me what initially like triggered it. When I remember I finished fourth in my local town's race, and fourth seemed close enough to first that it kind of made it realistic that maybe one day I could kind of get up there. And so that's when I joined the running club, and I just became determined and that I wanted to do it. But I guess for running, for me, what I love about running is it's kind of what you put in is what you get out. So if you work hard, you do all the things you're supposed to be doing, you rest, you recover, you get what you deserve at the end of the day. And you know, we all have setbacks, we all have struggles, but the more of those you go through, the better it feels when you do eventually get to that high point. And obviously you learn a lot about running and about yourself along the way. So that's kind of, I guess, what I love about running the most.
It's you know, and for you, loving the sport, competing in the sport yourself, you talked about being competitive, but you also were somebody that has really enjoyed kind of giving back to the sport and helping other people improve their running, and that's not always the case with, you know, professional and competitive runners. Where did that interest come from? Was that something that you always had with you when you started running, or something you developed?
Oh, I've never been asked that before. I guess
That's right. I told you I was going to ask you.
I know. I like this. I like this. It's cool to kind of get me thinking. But actually, I have one of the things I've always prided myself on is I like to make other people feel good about themselves, or like to make other people feel like they're not alone. And I've always felt that way. In fact, a few weeks ago, or I guess a month ago, I was home in England and I came across a piece of paper that I had made when I was 14, and it said, I am happiest when, and it said, I am running well and I am making other people smile. And I wrote that at age 14. So I think I've always liked helping other people, but because of what I achieved in running, that was kind of the area that people came to me asking for help. And I loved seeing them, you know, try something that I suggested and coming back and saying, hey, I did this and it worked and I ran a PR. And so it's always been kind of there. But I guess as the years went on, I realized how much joy that actually brought me to see other people doing well and know that, you know, there's so much you can do for yourself, but it's so much more rewarding to help other people with their dreams as well.
Do you think that element that, you know, that you still have and that you're still able to do, has that helped you get through this? Because like you said, it's not like you're just totally stepping away from this community and, like, you know, stop talking to all these people that you've been connected with. It's just not your personal obsession in your own life every single day. How much has that helped you?
No, I absolutely think that's helped so much. And that's why I think when people say to me, oh, you must really miss running. And I'm like, actually, I haven't really missed it. I've quite liked being able to straighten my hair and leave it for a few days and, you know, wear a dress and things like that. And I think that's why, because I've been able to make it into something, I don't know, just something like fun to help other people. And I think that's always been that way. But it's just, I don't know. I guess I've always loved it, and even more so now. It's just made it easier to like transition out of this phase because I can kind of channel all my love and support and everything into other people, and it's actually given me a good point to kind of step back and reflect. So it's, you know, things that when you're deep in the middle of it, you kind of can't really. It's a bit fuzzy all around you. You're in like a fog, but then, you know, when you get out the other side, you're like, oh, I know what I learned. So I'm like out the other side and I'm kind of like talking to those people in the fog. Like, I know what it feels like, that you will make it. And yeah, it's very rewarding.
And I think that's one of the things that's so interesting about running is, you know, you're doing it at a certain level and now you're working with other people that might be doing it at a different level, but there's so many things that resonate that are similar, you know, that might not be the case with, you know, other professional sports. I mean, I'm sure there's certain things that I could learn from LeBron James, but it's not the same thing. You know, it's not the same thing as somebody that's able to connect with you and follow what you're doing. How much have you kind of lived that and seen that as you've moved full time into this phase of focusing on helping other people?
I mean, I've definitely seen a lot of people who I'm all into running by feel and not being obsessed with the Garmin, and I've really been that's one thing I've really been trying to put across, like, just trust me and try and run without your Garmin, and seeing people do it and trusting what I call the effort scale, and and seeing it work for people, yeah, it's been great. So it's really nice to see it actually kind of following through and actually seeing some results coming through from it. And yeah, I mean, does that answer the question? I'm not sure.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
There's been a lot of them.
How has it been different? You said you haven't run for 6 weeks. When you made this decision, was that really the plan? Like, I'm just going to drop it completely, or for a period of time? Or were you kind of thinking, like, after 2 weeks, I might get the itch and go out and run a few miles? How has it been?
I didn't know at the time it happened, because the moment I stopped running was such a like emotional moment. I just kind of, I say I snapped. It was like this had been building, and then suddenly I was like, I can't do this anymore. And so at that point, it was so unlike anything else I'd ever experienced. So at that point, I just didn't know what was going to happen. But then I said to myself, okay, I'll take 4 weeks off and I'll see how I feel. And so that's what I kind of did. I said, oh, all right, 4 weeks, that's a good amount of time. And that was beyond anything I'd ever done before, because the most I'd taken 4 weeks off before, but I cross-trained like 3 hours a day. So I don't know if that really counted. So I'd never really taken more than 2 weeks of just nothing. So it was interesting to see what would happen. But I got to the 4-week mark, and I kind of felt like I'd committed myself this far to just really focusing on my body and getting this cycle back, that it just seemed like carrying on with it was the most natural thing to do. And I actually said to Steve this morning, my husband, I said, you know what, I think the day I get it back, I'd like to go for a run, which sounds completely ridiculous, because that's the one thing like that I could stop. But I actually think I'd kind of like to do it as like a celebration, kind of like, I'm doing this for me now. Like I've reset my body essentially, and now I can kind of begin day one as, I'm just going to do a few times a week. I'd like to get to the point to where I'm running like the recommended daily amount, like 30 to 45 minutes, 4 times a week. So I don't see it being like forever, and I don't see it being I'm never going to run a step again. But yeah, it did just kind of, I didn't really have a plan. I've just been kind of allowing my joy to like tell me what I'm ready for and what I want to do. So
that must be a liberating place to be at, right?
Mm-hmm.
When you're training so hard competitively,
yeah.
You're kind of in that mindset where it doesn't matter what I feel like doing, this is what I have to do. Has this been liberating?
Absolutely. And that's the funny thing thinking about it, is like, yeah, when you're in the training, and I'm one of those people too, people would often say, oh, I bet you never struggle with your runs. And I'd say, actually, yeah, like 5 out of 7 days, I'm like, oh, I'm so tired. And it has been nice to like just feel rested. And I've been trying to teach myself, which is hard. I don't know if I get the feeling you're very similar with me with this, and I'm sure a lot of people watching are too, but just sitting on the couch and just being still and not playing with your phone and not doing anything, it's really hard to actually like just allow yourself to do it. So I've been trying to do that, and it does feel so good to like I said, I've been following joy and not thinking I have to do anything, and just kind of picking and choosing what I want to do. So I have really enjoyed that aspect of it. I have been doing some strength training twice a week with my coach Drew, and that's the only exercise I've been doing, but it's what I enjoy. And I did a trampolining class because I was like, you know what, that sounds like fun. So it's kind of nice to go back into like a kind of almost like childlike state of like, what is fun? Well, this fun, I'm going to go do this. So yeah, definitely liberating and nice after 14 years of just continuous go. It's nice to kind of slow down a little bit.
So, when you came to this decision, you obviously put it out in a very personal way. And I think part of the reason you've been able to connect with people in the running community mm-hmm. for the last several years is because of that openness that you've shared, right? So people feel like they know who you are, whether or not they know who you are. But and that's a great thing. I think that's really cool with like the power of the internet and social media and all that. When you were kind of thinking this through, both like putting yourself out emotionally and then also just talking about a very real physical issue, that you were having, like what came with that in terms of nervousness? Was there anxiety in putting that kind of honest look at yourself out there?
I think there would have been now had I gone back a month and known what it was going to be like. But at the time, I didn't really think there was going to be so many, like, I guess I didn't think it would kind of take off the way it has. So when I published, well, I should backtrack. About 2 or 3 years ago, I was talking to a few friends who were also in the same boat, same kind of thing. One of them is a fellow UCAN athlete. I don't know if she wants me to mention her name, but she knows who she is. We were talking, other people were talking, and all kind of saying like, I've tried this, I've tried this, I've tried this, and I remember saying like, look, when I'm ready, I'm going to go after this. Like, I'm going to make this public, and I'm going to really put it out there, and I'm going to make sure everyone knows what this is, and it's as common as an ear infection. But then when it came to it, I just kind of published it with my like blog readers and people that knew me, because I was like, well, they like me, whatever, and anyone that doesn't want to read it, fine. I don't care. And then I just kind of, it went out of my mind. Like, it was just like, well, it's done now. But then I started getting some interest in it, and then, one thing kind of led to another thing, and then Runner's World got involved, and then once Runner's World got involved, I didn't realize how big Runner's World actually is. I guess I found out in the last few days. But that kind of spiraled into itself. So a lot has come with it, good and bad, mostly good. I mean, I've probably had, I'd say 5,000, 6,000, 7,000 people total have somehow reached out to me, and it's just like, I can't even begin to, like, there's so many unanswered emails that I feel bad, and things like that, and comments and all that. But knowing the amount of women that have reached out to me and said, thank you, like, I really felt like I was the only one. I felt embarrassed, like, you've literally read my mind. So that just was not only empowering for me, but like, I tried to keep it in the perspective of thinking of like a teenage girl, like maybe a 15-year-old girl who is with her dad, and she doesn't, you can't talk to your dad about this, but well, most girls probably couldn't. I can't imagine talking to my dad about this kind of thing, although I am now, but at the time. And so I thought, if I can be out there and say, as an elite runner, I struggled with this, and this isn't everyone, but every elite runner or everyone who's dealing with this, but I have tried everything, and this is the only solution I can come up with. If I could do that, then maybe other people could be like, oh, I'm not the only one, or at least it could get people thinking that, like, if they're not having a cycle, then maybe something is wrong. And you can obviously always start with the nutrition, and that's always the #1 way to go. But I just wanted to get a conversation going, and yeah, there's been some negative stuff. I mean, I guess there always is going to be, and I am quite sensitive, so it's hard to kind of ignore that. But at the same time, it's well worth it for the amount of negative to positive. I mean, there's 200 times the positive to the negative, but just is what it is, I guess, with that.
And I guess it is the nature when you're writing about something so personal, then the negative can seem to kind of stick more than the overall positive.
It's funny how we do that.
Yeah. You mentioned something there, Tina, also in talking about like empowerment, and so many times I think like when people think of empowerment, it's kind of, you think of it more in the context maybe of people overcoming an obstacle, or it's like tied to success, and not in any way to suggest what you're doing isn't success, but this is like, how do you view this? It's a different kind of empowerment, right? It's almost telling people like, I'm vulnerable too, like you don't have to like beat yourself up just because you're not at every point 100% driven to chase what you thought was your goal. So what is kind of that been like, having that conversation with people that have been able to relate to just sometimes feeling like I don't want to do this?
Yeah, and I think, I mean, that's one thing that I've been thinking about a lot lately, and I know you and I have talked about this a few times in the past, where it's really, we live in this world where we just go on social media and all we see are these wonderful pictures of everyone, and it just makes you feel bad about yourself. And I've always, well, I say always, probably the last 2 or 3 years, I've wanted to say that, like, look, I might be an elite runner, I might be, an international runner, but I still struggle too. And I think we feel too scared to kind of share that we are vulnerable. And I love Brené Brown and all the stuff that she does. I don't know if you're aware of her, but And she's always talking about it's okay to be vulnerable, and that's actually bravery. And it kind of gets me thinking that why should we be embarrassed to kind of share that we are having bad moments in it? And I have found that, like, by saying, you know, I'm having a hard day, you know, this is not going right, it's hard to get it out, but people, if you surround yourself by good people, they're going to raise you up and they're going to help you feel better about yourself. And then when they're down, you can be there for them and raise them up. And then when you achieve something, or you get something, or you succeed in something, like for me, it's going to be is when my body succeeds. Everyone is happy for you because they know what you've been through to get there. Whereas, you know, if you kind of just go along and like, hi, everything is great, I'm feeling wonderful, then people aren't going to like relate to you very well. So, you know, having these people reach out to me and kind of share their stories and say, I've really been struggling with this is my story. I mean, they're being brave themselves, telling a random stranger that, you know, they've been struggling with something. So yeah, it's not the traditional sense of empowerment. And I love that you brought that up, because I didn't even think of it that way, but it's so true. And it's something, you know, that's so important that isn't discussed enough. And there's so many of these things out there today, but I just feel by being honest and vulnerable, it helps.
No question. I think that was what struck me, you know, reading kind of the response directly on your blog, some of the posts in your community page too, were just how many people kind of felt like you were giving them a voice to talk about it, you know, which was, I mean, it's pretty special to see. I thought it definitely struck me. So that, yeah, I mean, I guess it's tough to say like you imagine that, but in the best case scenario, when you were thinking in your mind, how would this be received? Like, what was the best case scenario? What do you think you were hoping for? Or was it more like you just wanted to get this off your chest and whatever happened with it happened?
I think part of it was getting it off my chest. Like, I felt like this sounds ridiculous, but I felt like I was lying to people by not telling them, because I felt like, you know, I've always, I mean, you know, anyone who knows me knows I love my sweets. In fact, we just came back from dinner, my husband and I. We walked in the door and we grabbed our sweets, because that was the first thing to do. And I had to get them in before I did this webinar, because I couldn't possibly not. But so I've always like prided myself on saying, look, I eat well, I have burger and fries, I have sweets every day, all that. But then, so I was saying, this is me, I share my struggles, but then I wasn't telling them this huge secret, and I felt like I was lying. So yeah, it was partly to like get it off my chest and say, okay, now you know everything. But then at the same time, it was for other people, and being able to kind of, I did hope that, like I said, I want this to be as well known as like an ear infection, and it's something that like people go through, and it's, you know, and it happens, but you know that, okay, this happens, I'm going to go sort out my nutrition, and then I'm going to do this, and kind of almost have like a checklist of things to work through. And actually this book, No Period Now What, is a book. The author I've been working with a lot, Nicola Rinaldi, and she's been amazing with this, and she's got like 5 factors that cause this, and most people are only actually aware of one. So it was nice to kind of like be able to get it out there and kind of say that, you know, it's okay not to be okay. But I guess I just want it to be where people don't feel ashamed to admit they have it. Like I did for all those years. Whenever anyone would be kind of talking about female stuff, I would just kind of like slink to the corner, because I didn't want anyone to ask me about it. And so I want it to be something where, you know, you say I have amenorrhea, but it's okay, I'm doing something about it. So I guess I just want it to be more well known.
I think you're doing plenty for that, and I know you'll be continuing to focus on that awareness absolutely moving forward. So, you know, when you were running professionally, you know, you did a lot of playing around with nutrition and from a running fueling standpoint, and I think it generated a lot of interest in terms of I remember at that time a lot of people were kind of following you and getting your feedback on different fueling strategies that you played around with. I want to spend a little bit of time chatting with you about that. When you first moved up into distance in the sport, just overall, what was your view, not just of fueling from a sports nutrition standpoint, but like what was your view of what you needed to do to run that mileage?
You mean like, are you saying like maybe half marathon and beyond, or like
Yeah, yeah,
even? Yeah.
half marathon and beyond. You know, what,
Yeah,
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 what,
yeah. I'd say when I first moved up the half marathon, I had no real clue what I was doing. I was still just kind of eating what I'd grown up eating, and still having a lot of stomach issues. And so for the half marathon, I was just kind of doing a bit of everything. But then once I moved up into the marathon, I obviously became aware that you needed to fuel yourself. And I did try out a ton of different products, and I was still getting lots of stomach upsets. And I'm not sure looking back if it was the gels, if it was what I was eating before I ran, if it was what the night before. But I found I was running to the bathroom nearly every time I tried to run hard. So looking back now, didn't really have that down, but I think a lot of that comes with that practice that you need to do with whatever you're taking. You need to practice it, and I think that's another thing that I've kind of learned now. It's kind of cool that I can say to people like, look, if you have an upset stomach, something is not sitting well, so change it. And so yeah, I started off, I guess, mostly just like the typical runner diet of like stuffing yourself full the night before a race of pasta, so you go to bed like, ugh, this is sick, and then just binging on carbs all the time, and just making the most of the runner lifestyle. I still definitely had a lot of sugar, but it was just kind of a typical runner diet. And then I did kind of transition, as I'm sure you're going to ask in a minute.
Yeah, what was the awakening for you? Like, why did you decide to transition? Were you like a very analytical person when it came to your nutrition, or I'm curious about all those things.
I think the seed was first planted when I did my first marathon. I'm still not sure what happened, but at mile 19, it was half a mile after I took my third caffeinated gel, and I didn't drink coffee. So I think it might have been the caffeine, but whatever it was, I don't know how I finished. I have no memory of the last like 3 miles, so I don't know where I went during that time. But that kind of was a bit of a wake up of like, okay, you need to do something. And so that started it, but of like me thinking more about general nutrition, and like I want to get more healthy foods in and look after my body and give it the best chance of running well and stuff. But then when was it? I actually was talking to Tawny Prazak, who I know you know as well.
Yeah.
And Tawny, I had her on my podcast, the Run to the Top podcast I used to host, and she was describing her story of when she was struggling and when she kind of ultimately stepped away from triathlons. And when she was talking about her story, it was eerily similar. And I can't even describe to you how her story, I was listening to it and I was like, you are describing my life. And so I was a bit scared, and she kind of talked about it. And so a few weeks later, I started working with her, and she said to me about maybe I should try eating more fats, because again, it brought up this amenorrhea thing. And she said, if you eat more fats and you start to maybe try and have more protein and kind of eat, not paleo, but kind of move away from the simple carbs, then maybe that will help you. And so I did. I bought into it and I tried it, and I just started feeling really good. I just felt full. I didn't wake up in the morning like, give me food, which is how I was always waking up before. And I just noticed I felt better in every way. So then that kind of transitioned, and then I just continued to kind of work that way. I did take it a bit too far, I think, at one point. And I had a few bad races in a row, and I think that was because I wasn't getting enough carbs. But I felt like the last 6 months or so I got kind of a happy balance, and now I have to admit I'm not doing so well with the sugar intake, but otherwise it's been good.
You've earned that for at least a little bit. So I'm curious, a lot of times people like to think of these things quantifiably. So what would your old fueling strategy, which you describe being kind of the traditional runner diet, what would say a breakfast, lunch, and dinner look like compared to what you were doing after you started working with Tawny and considering upping the fat and protein?
Yeah, so I mean, I guess before before I started doing anything different, it was it was the pasta the night before, before a race. I think it was a bagel and a banana, which is fine. A lot of people do like bagels and bananas, but I just found once I did change, I found that I like things better. But and then yeah, during my races, I was just using the typical gels. Thankfully, I only needed about 3. I know a lot of people, 4 or 5 hour marathoners have like 6, 7, and I can't even imagine having that because 3 seemed like too much. But yeah, so I was just relying on more like typical sources, but I definitely noticed in races when it was like time for another one because of the like sudden like energy crash that I ended up having. And then yeah, once I started working with Tawny, it turned to more whole food sources. So the night before was potatoes and or rice. And funny story, before the London Marathon in 2016, my parents and I literally spent like 2 hours the night before the race walking around, going in every restaurant going, do you have a potato? Like just a potato. And they were like, no. And we were like, we just want a potato. So, and then the morning of a race, I would have sweet potato and almond butter, which I love, and I could eat it all day, every day. So it sounds weird, but it really works. And then now I just rely on UCAN. I'm sure you know this, but anyone watching, for my last marathon, I 100% relied on UCAN, had nothing else in my race, and I didn't notice I just felt like consistent the whole way with my energy levels. I did notice the like mental fatigue around mile 20, so I did use like just some caffeinated gum to just mentally pick me up, but energy levels of like just feeling of my body, it was like night and day. I really can see the difference between like the other marathons where it was like, I'm in a good patch, I'm in a bad patch, I'm in a good patch, I'm in a bad patch. And whereas this was just more of a like consistent kind of slow burn, but in a good way. So, and then, yeah, I guess, yeah, the biggest difference was just eating more whole foods and trying to make better choices, not to just necessarily rely on those like processed carbohydrates all the time that I had been before.
I definitely want to dive in a little bit more with your experience with UCAN, but before I ask you that, when you were, shifting more to the higher fat diet and reducing your carbs, how deep were you going with it? I'm just curious. Were you like at the point where you were really counting carbs, and was there ever a point where you were like virtually having no carbs, or was it just more of a general mindset where it's like, okay, I know how I should orient my plate around each meal, and you were just more thinking through it in that way?
Yeah, I think it was I definitely never got to the point of counting, and I'm glad. And I like, that's another thing, I kind of pride myself on not like being, I don't want to know, basically. Like, I don't have a scale in my house, I don't want to know the weight. I don't count my calories, I don't want to know, like. But I think, yeah, it was just more of like a kind of being aware of what things were doing. I was trying to make sure I had like protein for breakfast, so it was like a 4-egg omelet. So then, that's one meal, just straight protein. And I was definitely still having carbs throughout the day, but they would be like roasted sweet potatoes, roasted parsnips, a lot of roasted vegetables. I was going through about a mountain of coconut a day. Because it just tastes so good. This coconut butter that Tawny got me into. And then, yeah, it was just, I just noticed towards the end, when I did take it, I guess, too far. It wasn't that my carbs were too low overall. I think for a normal person, they would have been fine. And for marathon training, it was okay. But it was in combination with doing like speed work, like 5K, 10K kind of style races, I was finding that I don't think I had the carb reserves there to be able to kind of dig into that when I needed to go fast. So it was just the meals I guess it was the dinners that ended up being the difference, because the dinners ended up being like big hearty salads, but they still didn't really have many carbs other than maybe some chopped up vegetables, or like starchy vegetables, but still vegetables. And so I think it just kind of, it didn't deplete my carb stores, and obviously UCAN did have the carbs that I was eating throughout the day as well. But I think I just, I I just took it a little bit too far with eating, I guess, too many vegetables, if that's a thing.
It's interesting to kind of to see, you know, how playing around with different approaches and kind of self experimentation and how it works out. Did you notice? So you know, you kind of talked about what you felt in the context of running, but what did you notice that you were feeling in terms of day-to-day energy? Was there any big noticeable difference with how you felt, you know, day-to-day training, day-to-day energy when you were cutting a lot of those processed carbs out of your diet?
Yeah, I noticed that I could go a lot longer without having to eat. Like again, I was having a lot of protein as well, so that was helping. The fat and the protein. I just found that I would have a meal. Let's say I had my lunch at 12 p.m. and I wouldn't need to eat anything until 4. And I know that sounds ridiculous because people are probably like, 4 hours? Like, what's that? But for me, when I was before, it was literally every hour or 2 hours. It was like I'd find myself in the kitchen again, like, I'm hungry. And it would be that like noise in your stomach and you're like, I just ate. How am I hungry again? So that was the biggest difference I noticed, was that I just didn't feel like I needed to eat every 2 hours like I felt full. And, you know, a 4-egg omelette, I struggle to find someone, unless you're like Arnold Schwarzenegger or like, whatever, that doesn't, a 4-egg omelette isn't going to keep you full. But so that, you know, it just helped to like kind of give me good nutrition, but then I wasn't just starving all the time. And then the other big thing that kind of comes to mind is I remember being on long runs, and I was practicing with my UCAN just because I said to you that you need to practice your nutrition, whatever it is, but I didn't feel like I needed it. I noticed that like I didn't, like before in marathon training, in long runs, I'd be about an hour in and I'd be like, oh, I can't wait for my gel, because I was hungry. And then, you know, let's say I was 2 hours in, I was like, oh, I need 3 more minutes and I get a gel. Whereas like I noticed in marathon training, it wasn't so much that I was like, oh, I'm so hungry, I need to eat. It was, I felt actually pretty good, and like my energy was consistent. And obviously, you know, most long runs, you're not going to get the full distance. And I knew that it was better to kind of practice it now and not like throw it in there when you actually need it for the full distance. But I just noticed that my energy levels were more stable. So that was the biggest difference, I guess, otherwise.
So let's talk about how you can enter this whole picture. I know you and I have probably talked about this in the past, but actually don't remember. So let's
well,
why not? How did you get introduced to the product, or how did you hear about it?
I don't even remember how it was originally. I heard about it in 2014 first. I can't remember how I came across it, but I did, and I loved it immediately. I liked the one that happens to be sitting on my thing. I did say yesterday in a live chat that I do not just play, these just sit here. They're not placed here for just these videos. They literally live there. But, that one's my favorite, the blueberry pomegranate, although you told me, and everyone I've spoken to says that's the worst flavor, but I think that's the best flavor, so I'm gonna give this some love. But so I started using it, I loved it, but then for the London Marathon, I wasn't in the elite field, and so I had to carry whatever I wanted on me, and so I could have done this. I didn't know there was I didn't know people made them into their own gels, which I've heard about since, which is really cool. But I didn't know about that, so I just went back to the gels. And then as soon as I got the opportunity to try this again, I went straight back to it because I knew it worked and I knew it was helpful. But yeah, so then I can't remember what the question was.
Yeah, so that was kind of how you heard about it first. No, that's fine. Okay. So when I'm curious, when you first started using it, what was kind of the rationale? Did you understand, you know, how it worked? What was different about it? Was it just, hey, this is lower in sugar, let me try this? What was kind of your experience when you first were playing around with it?
Yeah, I think it was just that, you know, I'd heard people had been using it. I can't remember who it was, but it was a few other elite runners had said, oh, I really like this generation UCAN. I don't think it was Meb, but it was probably someone similar. But I remember hearing people saying, oh, it's really good and I like it. And I didn't realize at the time they were talking about a lot of people had it before races. Yeah. To me, my pre-race meal was like I would never think to have like a drink or like a bar. Like for me, a pre-race meal, that would never have crossed my mind. So I think at the time, whoever it was actually talking about having it before, but I kind of took it as, oh, it's for during. And so I just guess I just started testing it out. And I just, like I said, I felt like the energy level just stayed the same, and it was felt so much more natural. And once I kind of got used to the like texture of it, because it is a little bit like thick sometimes, yeah, I had to kind of gradually build up to the actual serving size. But no, I quite liked it, and I kind of looked forward to like having a flavored drink rather than just sucking down this like goo and then being like sticky and like for a while. So I kind of liked that I could kind of sip on a drink and it kind of be something to look forward to. So
you also, once you started playing around with it more, I know you started being creative with it in terms of a pre-fueling option, and you incorporated it into this bowl you had. What would give us an idea of what you were doing there? I think that's pretty interesting.
Yeah, again, I have to give Tawny credit to this. I feel like I'm talking about Tawny all the time.
Hey, all good.
Tawny was the one that put the idea in my head. Well, she gave me the original bowl, and I kind of modified it a little bit. But yeah, so she had this idea for a bowl, and then I just kind of like went off with it. And it sounds weird, so anyone listening, and I know I've told you about it, so you know this, but it sounds weird, but don't knock it until you tried it. So I would put mashed up sweet potato, mashed up avocado, cinnamon, a little bit of butter, coconut, shredded coconut, some cacao nibs, some berries, I think that's it, maybe some almonds, and literally just mix it in a mash bowl, and then like I sprinkle some UCAN over the top and then stir it in a little bit more. And I don't know, I just love it. I would have it 2 or 3 times a week in my training, and yeah, either before a run or I'd have it after a run with some meat or some kind of protein. But I just found it was just a great way, like the UCAN made it taste so much better. And I got my mum into it. She takes it for work, for lunch for work now. And so, yeah, it came a bit of a weird thing. And I am actually looking forward to kind of testing it out. No, I haven't got the like use of it for the running side of things myself. I'm looking forward to kind of testing out some recipes. And I know Heidi Greenwood is really into that. And I'm kind of looking forward to trying it out, because it is perfect for cooking with as well.
Definitely, she's the best in the business when it comes to UCAN recipes. Her Instagram is littered with incredibly looking. And yeah, I think I've made at least 3 or 4 of her different recipes. She just had one up for these almond flour cookies with the plain UCAN mixed in them. So
yeah, it looks good.
So that's all really interesting. And I have one more thing for you on the UCAN. So you definitely talked about finding an application for it in your racing. What did you find the application for UCAN was in your training? That's one of the things that's been interesting for us. There's certain convenience elements, of course, of UCAN. Like if you don't have elite bottles, like you mentioned, you have to kind of figure out how to make it into a gel. And for some people that works great. For others, they may or may not want to deal with that. But what we've been hearing from so many top level athletes and all the way down is just kind of the power of UCAN in training as a training tool. What did you find, and how are you most often using it in your training?
Well, as I mentioned, like 2 or 3 times a week, I would have it in that bowl, and I loved doing it that way. And then obviously, as I mentioned, the practice thing, I was practicing it for my workouts. So those were another day that I was getting it during, like doing it at the exact intervals of time that I expected to do it on race day. So that was more the drink. But then I found the bars were the ones that I was loving for like just day to day, like straight after a run. And I still am doing it now. I eat a bar at least once every day. And I just find this obviously convenient that you can just take it with you anywhere. The chocolate one maybe a little bit, but the others don't really, it doesn't matter if they're in a warm car. And I just, they're really easy for me. I quite often have one of those when I first wake up in the morning, because it's just kind of when you're like fumbling around in the morning, it's an easy thing to take with you. And then, yeah, I actually find myself like sipping on it like throughout the day just anyway, because like I said, I actually really like the taste of it, especially the blueberry pomegranate. Is it blueberry pomegranate? Yeah.
You got it. That's it.
Pomegranate, yeah. That's my favorite one, so I just like using that. But yeah, I think it absolutely has a place in training, and it just, it's great for drinking, and that's the thing I love about it. It's before, during, and after. And I've told so many people lately that like I have never ever come across anyone who's had a stomach upset with UCAN. So like if anyone has had stomach upsets either in races or in runs, I'm just like, look, I know how much that sucks and how horrible that feels, but I've never come across anyone who has that with UCAN. So it's a good thing I can rely on for like knowing that my stomach is not going to be upset. And that's pretty reassuring because no one likes the feel of that.
It's it blows my mind how many and how frustrating that can be for so many people, where the nutrition is such a variable on race day. You put in all this time and energy and effort, and then one gel goes down wrong midway, and it can be very frustrating. I just want to take a second, Tina. We have a couple people who may or may not be familiar with UCAN, so we'll just spend a moment on this. But when Tina's talking about using the products, whether it's the bars or the powders that she's referencing, the uniqueness is the starch. So with UCAN, we use super starch is what we call the carbohydrate. That's what's the energy source instead of sugar or your maltodextrin, which you'll find in your gel. So that's going to give you much more of a slow and steady release and a much more consistent and even release of energy instead of that sugar spike. So whether that's pre-training or post-training, during training, there's different applications depending on how you want to use it. And Tina talks about the bars and the powders, but they all center around that fundamental idea of stabilizing your blood sugar and your energy levels. As you've kind of worked with people or been in the community where people are coming to you with their challenges in running, what are some of the most common? We talked about stomach issues. What are the fueling challenges that people are coming to you with? Are there any one or two things else outside of stomach issues that you feel like people struggle with when they're moving up in distance and training for the marathon?
I think that's definitely the number one one, and I think that's because that's the one that's most apparent. Like if you cramp or if you struggle in a race, that could be 100 things causing it, but like stomach upset, there's only one thing that's going to cause that, and so I think that's the biggest one. But then I think a lot of it is people kind of just say they bonk, and I think that term is kind of thrown around a bit too often, but I think that's another thing. People feel like they just crash, and like I said, my first marathon, I definitely experienced some version of that, and there's really nothing you can do. And I remember in that race being like I remember volunteers like literally shoving stuff in my face, and I was just like, oh, it's too much energy to grab a cup.
I was going to say, if you, like you said, with bonked, if you've bonked, you know what it is, and it's exactly what you're describing. It's not, not being tired or not just not feeling like going any further. It's what you're talking about.
Too much. It's like, oh, that's too much energy, too much to use. But so I think that's a very common one. People like run out of energy later in the race. So I think the problem is that we often think, you're early in the race, you're like, oh, I feel great. I don't need to drink this. I don't want to break my rhythm by slowing down to drink something. But then obviously it comes to get you later on. So that's probably the biggest one. And then I'd just say people, a lot of the time, I think we get guilty of that, again, this comparison thing, thinking, oh, this works for them, so it's got to work for me. But I think, some people can eat 20 minutes before they run. Some people need 5 hours. So I think that's another thing, is kind of testing out what works for you and finding what your equilibrium point is, because we're all different and we all have different sensitivities and stuff. So I think that's probably the third problem I would say is, people will say to me, tell me your exact plan before a race. And I'm like, no, because that's my plan. You need to figure out what would be best for you, because I can guarantee you something about my plan isn't going to sit well with you. So I think everyone finding their own kind of what's best.
I think that's such a great point. That's probably something that you convey that why people resonate with you, because it isn't one size fits all. And there's definitely, I think it's important for people to at least understand certain principles, and at least have the education, this is how different fuels are going to affect me. But then ultimately, what you do with that information, you got to experiment and see what settles well for you. It's like the science will take you to a certain place, but then it's going to come down to you individually to see what works best. Tina, I've got about 10 more minutes with you. Really, really enjoyed this. I want to give folks, if they do have any questions for Tina in the live audience that's joining us today, feel free to shoot them our way. But I've got a couple more for you in the meantime, so I'll be selfish while people are getting their questions.
Yeah, don't be scared of me.
That's right. That's right. As you can see, she's very, very, very friendly. So, what do you think is next for you? Do you have any way to predict, like 5 years from now, do you feel like you're going to come back to the sport and want to do it at a professional level? Is it just too hard to say? Has it not been enough time? What's your sense?
No, I absolutely want to come back. I've always, and it's funny, one of the only things that with the articles going around right now is when they use the word retired, I'm like, I have not retired.
That's what I want to tell you. I was actually poring over that for a little bit. I was like, do I say former? And so I finally went with professional runner on hiatus, because I was like,
yes, that's what I want to say.
Like, that's how you described it. I was like, that's a good way to describe it.
Yeah, and again, it comes down to that thing of, I said, I think if I'd have kept trying to force it, and I would have either ended up so burned out from it, or getting an injury after injury after injury until I didn't get to leave on my own terms. I was just kind of like, you know what, I'm done. And so being able to go on my own terms meant that I still had that fire. And I've always believed that, like, since I was like 20 years old. I don't know why, but I've always had that feeling of like, I'm going to be that 38-year-old woman who comes back and runs faster than ever. I've always had that feeling. And so, yes, I absolutely want to come back. And honestly, part of the reason I stopped when I did was because once I achieved that Great Britain goal, I kind of lost a lot of the, like, I still had motivation to go, but it wasn't quite the same level. Like, my husband said it best, that I was able to switch off my competitive drive so that when it came to that moment where you absolutely go for broke, I could kind of override it now. And I feel like coming back will give me that again. I want to do this to prove that I can, and prove that it can be done, and prove that mother runners are nothing, a force to be reckoned with. So yes, absolutely, I think I want to come back. Which is funny saying that. There's me like, oh, I've stopped running, and then I'm like already talking about coming back. But no, I definitely want to in the future. But I don't want to rush into it. That's the big thing. I don't want to end up getting fractures in my back and in my pelvis by trying to rush it. I want to, like, enjoy the next few years and see what happens. And then, yeah, I would, whether it be natural kids, whether we end up having to adopt, I don't know. I don't want to, like, put that out there, but, like, one way or another, I would like to come back and see what I could do. I feel like I definitely have some unfinished business in almost every event. So.
Let's take a couple questions from the audience. So Janine says, Tina, thanks so much for sharing your story. You're clearly an inspiration to many. And then she asked, who are your role models in running? Who's inspired you?
Well, right now, the people that come to mind are, because of what I just said, the people like Cara Goucher, like Stephanie Bruce, who have come back from pregnancy and kind of, done that and kind of moved on. And I obviously love people, an English woman, Jo Pavey, who's definitely a role model of mine, because she again is a mother runner and has kind of done it late in her life. But Paula Radcliffe was always my role model when I was growing up. I always looked up to her because obviously best in the world there, and seeing her run around the streets, she was definitely the one I looked up to. But I think honestly a lot of it, I know this sounds really cheesy, but I love, like, drawing inspiration from so many people, and that's what, like, on the podcast I host, I have one person that comes to mind is Julie Benson. Like, she was just an everyday runner. I hate using that term, but it gets the point across, and she had an amazing story, and I gain inspiration from, like, other people and the things they've overcome. So yeah, it's everywhere.
We've got a question from Jackie. She says, Tina, what's the favorite marathon that you've ever run?
Oh, well, London Marathon, but which one? I'd probably say 2015, because I had two really bad marathons before that, and And this one, I was like, I just want to have fun. So I was just like running around and I was like waving at my friends, and I ran hard, but it was just an amazing moment, like running across Tower Bridge and running by all these like monuments that I'd seen. And so that was a life-changing moment. So definitely that one.
Linda wants to know, do you have any mental tricks that you use in the marathon when it gets difficult?
Yes, my biggest one, I think most people who kind of know me already will know I use this. It's my sports psychologist Evie told me this, and it's all about be kind to yourself. So often when we're in runs and we're struggling, we're like, what is wrong with you? Why are you being so slow? Come on, hurry up. Why are you slowing down? And you're like getting angry at yourself. But I find if you kind of talk to yourself, or you imagine that your best friend, your sister, your brother, someone was running, you're alongside them and they were saying, oh, I'm useless, I suck, I'm the worst. You wouldn't be saying, yeah, you are. You'd be saying, hey, you're doing great, come on, you can do this, you're doing so well. So I try and like take that principle and imagine, like try and say those same things to myself. Or like to me, I find it helpful to imagine my husband alongside me and he's like, come on babe, you're doing great. So I just find that gets you in a more positive mindset, and you stop being so critical of yourself, which doesn't help because then it makes you feel worse about yourself and then you beat yourself up more. But if you are more confident and kind of say, you're doing great, then I just find that helps. So be kind to yourself.
That's a great point. I would, if I'm out there, the last thing I want to hear is somebody next to me chirping about how terrible I am, you know, so it could definitely drag you down. Well, Tina, this has been absolutely wonderful. And before we sign off, I do want to get, because it's clear that you really do a great job connecting with folks, and there's people here interested in knowing how they can continue to connect with you. So tell us a little bit about your new venture. You've just started the Running for Real podcast, which congratulations. I know you just launched it recently. So what's that all about, and what are you trying to accomplish with that?
Yeah, so well, firstly, thank you so much to anyone who has watched. I really, you could be spending your time so many other ways. So thank you for tuning in and listening to us chat. It's been fun. But yeah, so I have recently launched Running for Real, which is pretty much what I talked about today, which is the whole, it's okay to be vulnerable. It's okay to say you're struggling. And I've created this community, and Varen, I know you're part of it. And, it's just about where we all build one another up, and say someone says, I had a really bad day, then all these other people kind of jump on and say, you're doing great. And doing that, being your own best friend, this be kind to yourself stuff for you to kind of help you raise yourself up. And so I have a community. I don't know if you want to attach it in the email, the link to the community maybe. But I'd love if you would join. And yes, I do have a new podcast, the Running for Real podcast. You can find it on iTunes, Stitcher, Google Play, wherever. I do have a new episode coming out tomorrow. They come out every Friday. So hopefully you will subscribe and enjoy it. I interview people, running experts, running scientists, sports psychologists. A lot of it is focusing again on that real aspect of being able to, I'm asking these people that you probably look up to and saying, be real with us. Tell us about a moment you struggled and how you overcame it. And so it'll hopefully help you feel better about yourself and maybe give you some laughs along the way. But I'd love if you would join me, and you can find me everywhere else on the social world through my name, Tina Muir.
Awesome, and that is M-U-I-R, Tina Muir. I said it. I got it.
There you go.
Awesome. Well, like Tina mentioned, I'll definitely include a link to that in the follow-up with this video, where you can join the Running for Real community and subscribe to the Running for Real podcast. Definitely encourage that you check both out. And Tina, thank you for spending a very real hour with us. I really enjoyed it. I know you and I have spoken, but this is the first time we've spoken actually looking at each other's faces.
In real life. Well, not quite real life. Almost real life.
Yeah, I guess this is what substitutes for real life these days, but we'll take it. Well, it's better than texting, right? But thank you so much, Tina. We wish you absolutely nothing but the best, and look forward to giving the UCAN community more from Tina in the upcoming months.
Yes, thank you so much, and thank you guys for watching. All right, take care.
Take care, everybody. Have a good night. Thank you so much.